If you put DNA in the water, it will reanimate an entire reality again. It could take time as we know time, but reality will unfold again. So, as in this new series, the three-body problem, if one of us survives, all of us survives.
The following clip is exclusive content from the University. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Sevan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly, along with guides and regiments. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications.
I introduced something a while back, and I want to bring it forth again just for the purpose of this build today. And it was first that the Archons are the organs, right? And I talked about that for a while. So, just refreshing this really briefly, you come across this awareness of different archetypes within the reality. And when you search that spiritually, and try to find like the oldest story, you come into the story of the Archons. And in this story, we have these energies that take on basically the responsibility of being the most vilest and nastiest in this particular reality, and actually the harbingers and the cause of much of our problems, right? And the story starts with a being known as Sophia, or wisdom, who in its desires creates the visible spectrum of the reality, or in its desires creates the seen and known world. And also in this process creates the Demiurge, which makes up most of every story of the boogeyman or the devil or anything, or Angramania or any other entity that is supposed to be very dark and disturbing, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up today is because I happen to find also psychologically most of humanity's real cures within a cabinet that says, stay away, danger, crossbones, skull and crossbones, stay away from this. And I definitely find that to be by design, as if something is literally hiding the truth. I know that whatever that force is present. It could be just a contrast of truth, as we're going to learn here in just a moment. But the reality is trying to get to this knowledge or this wisdom on this level is very obscure. It's very obscure to reach. It's very arcane and occult. And for me, I felt like that would be the most valuable knowledge in the world then. And if somehow I could come across this arcane or occult knowledge, I would transcend into another level of life existence in my experience. And I have found that to be true. And so I have spent still the last 15 years detailing the arcane or occult, because it is quite voluminous, right? And so I wanted to highlight a few things about the Archons just to see how easy it is to see that the Archons clearly are the human beings. And let me just start with the story very briefly. I'm going to read it to you just so that you know it verbatim. And it won't take us but a second. I'm just going to look in the symbol here because I had already queried it. So, entwining Gnostic beliefs about creation of the universe, the nature of spiritual and material worlds, and the plight of the human soul trapped within the physical realm. Gnosticism, a broad and diverse set of dualistic beliefs and practices that emerged in the early Christian era, posits that the material world is the creation of a lower deity, often equated with the Old Testament God, and is inherently flawed and evil. The story of the Archons, creation and the Demiurge. The story begins with the supreme unknown God, often referred to as the monad, or the one, who exists in a realm of pure spirituality. From this supreme deity emanate a series of divine beings, or emanations, known as aeons, who inhabit the pleroma, the spiritual fullness of God. At some point, a disruption in the pleroma occurs, often attributed to the aeon Sophia, wisdom, who in her desire to know or replicate the monad acts independently and without her syzygy, her divine counterpart, and her action leads to the creation of Yaldabaoth, also known as the Demiurge, an imperfect being who is ignorant of the higher spiritual realms. Yaldabaoth, believing himself to be supreme God, creates the material universe and the Archons, powerful beings who serve as his administrators and his agents. The Archons, including figures named after planetary bodies and elements of the Old Testament, assist in governing the physical world and maintaining its separation from the divine realm. So I could go on with this just a little bit. There's a couple more points that I wanted to add here, but I just wanted to kind of bring some real clear, like, common sense to this. The first thing is that the interesting thing is that Sophia as a word in Greek, mind you, this is a Greek word, means wisdom, right? And this is where obviously the sophist of Sophia comes from. But it mentions in the Gnostic text that Sophia unknowingly creates or basically accidentally creates the Demiurge in her desires to, in this case, know God. And the interesting part about right away for me is that if you're impersonalized as wisdom, how do you not know something? I mean, I don't think anybody ever thought about that right away. It's like there are a few of these Gnostic texts and they like, oh, it was a mistake. But wisdom, the whole personification, like the epitome of it, would never make a mistake. And so that's kind of like the first hole in the story is that how can wisdom do something that is not wise? Okay. So this means already that to me gets my detectives going because now I know you're lying. And now I have to know the truth in order to truly crack this mystery. And this mystery is so deep. It had me like on a real alignment of what's happening and what's going on. So I'm just doing the best here today to share that with you. But it started here because so now I'm like, I'm going to speak about myself in third person. Okay, let me do this for a moment. I reached like some type of state of like mega mind in the way where I can really see almost every single scenario play out almost like a chess game. And I have like this huge board of everything that's actually taken place inside the game. And in that way, I have like this different way of looking at how things function and work. And I find it to be extremely accurate. And one of them was about how then I looked at the body as like a template, right? So I look at the body and then they often show these continuous designs of how even the universe and the cosmos is designed in this same fashion, right? The pentahedron, the pentagon or phi, and then all the moving through the geometry and everything. But it just shows how it all connects from phi to the torus, etc. And then I absolutely 100% positively know, no matter what the program says, or my mind says, or my mood says, or my moment says, that we are not separate. So when I enter into that sanctum, I come in completely unified. So I don't actually see myself separate from Demiurge, Archon, Sophia, or any character in the story, because I actually do believe now for sure 100% that that's some form of schizophrenia, that you're actually altering into different state and then perceiving other characters that are you, which is really crazy. But this just begins in Joker land. If you want to sober up from this, then you actually start looking at the condition and then start bringing solutions to the condition. And that brings on a lot of acceptance. So then when I look in the box of skull and bones, meaning the box of, hey, stay away, danger, what I find is that, first of all, the word Archon means a ruler. Okay. And I started examining human beings' role in the reality and how they're ruling over every damn thing. They rule over the animals, the trees, they shoot things, they move the dirt. So truly, they are the rulers. Like so of course, the other parody to this is that everybody is being controlled by energies, and these energies are making them do that. Almost like everybody is just a puppet and the energies are making them do that. And I find that that's to be the narrative within religions. Religion's immediately disempowered because they insist that it's the devil doing it to you and you need to resist the devil. So it makes it as like a separate character instead of saying that, hey, it's actually you doing it to yourself, or even broader, it's actually us doing it to the planet and us doing it to the animals, the kids, everything that we have going on. You will find people that's on that negative side or distorted side. You will find people there doing it. And then what will always be the scapegoat, which is again that form of schizophrenia and altering, is, oh man, yeah, I was in this other state of consciousness. These entities got on me and they made me do this. But see, for a person who is completely unified, that doesn't make any sense. And that's why I realized that you have two different worlds. You have people who are completely aware of that, and that's how they function. And then you have people who are not aware of that. And there's no in between. There's no people who are not aware of that, but they still kind of do it. No, you're still on that side of, because when you stop doing it, it unlocks something. When you stop being divided, you unlock something because you now get into more of the shared frequencies, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But it's just the awareness again. So as I was conceiving the grand design, I took it from the perspective of if this divisive world that is being described is true, because in many ways it would have to be in order for you to enter into division. So you would just find the most estranged story of what exactly happened, and it would be more or less in itself still a metaphor, not something that may even have happened like in an action, but some story that has been left behind that would explain exactly what went on. And I find that that is the Gnostic story of Sophia, the Demiurge, etc. But it gets heavily Christianized. That's why it's often found with other Christian works like the Nag Hammadi works, etc. Because these books of the Gnosticism were rolled in also with the Christian teachings. And then that's where I believe for sure it got corrupt, because we have come to understand completely 100% that the Christian God Yahweh is actually half Draco. And this just means that that the actual entity that people were worshiping was half human, half what we would say is reptilian. And this birthed and continues to birth, and it's happened also in other segments, even with the Naga, humans that are hybrids themselves. And the only issues you find, or there will be many issues that you may find, but issues with hybrids are generally that astral hygienically, and this is something that Dan Winter gets deep into, but from an astral hygiene level, because you have two different types of organisms in the same vehicle, each of them really takes on different characters, but a certain character is really needed to practice the proper astral hygiene. So let's say, for instance, if I mixed you a lot with pigs, but it took being clean to be have good astral hygiene, and you were, let's say, mixed with both, you would struggle against that side that is trying to keep you dirty. And so thus you would constantly stay in somewhat of a paradox of wanting to do one thing, but actually doing another, which is almost like the description of the average human being until you get everything into alignment. So just in also seeing this bigger picture, I decided to accept this idea of enclosed, they call this the enclosed house, okay, in occultism, that this realm, which we now have learned as the visible spectrum on the wavelength, right, is a illusory world. It is designed in many ways in the same of what you would get outside of this frequency range, but in many ways it is controlled, it is separated, it is governed. But I didn't want to take on that, and now I'm inside of it, and I'm trapped inside of it. I wanted to come into complete acceptance of how it was even designed before I would accept such things. And so I put my mind to thinking, how could something like that even be designed? And it wasn't long before I came into the reality that it would be that you would have to construct everything within that design with a lot of the same parts, if not all of the same parts. So you will create an illusion only on the outside. Only on the outside would they seem to be different. But in the inside, pretty much all the parts are the same. And the more beings that have the same parts, the more those beings would be synchronized or grouped together. Okay. So I realized that it was the organs. And even the word organ and archon and all of those words numerically equaled the same numbers. So I started examining, were the organs the archons first? And in this process, my theory that I was propositing was, if everybody has a heart, let's say, okay, even though everybody's hearts are in generally different conditions, but the role of the heart is the same, we could then have what we would call like the heart archon, okay? And that the frequency of this being would control all hearts, because this is the very heart itself. This is the master heart, okay? And then we would distribute these hearts amongst as many organisms that we wanted to be in that reality. And so, of course, that goes for all the rest of the parts, right? Like even the bowels, the spleen, the pineals, that every time I made an upgrade, every being that I wanted to include inside of that envelope, that realm, I would need to upgrade them all with the same parts. So you'll notice that most of the domesticated animals have exactly the same parts that we do. They even have pineals, they have hearts, they have everything, right? Versus many of the insects don't at all have the same parts. Hence why it could seem like that they are disconnected from this reality, like in a certain way, like you can't talk to them, you can't communicate with them. And so to other beings, other life forms, that they have some of the stuff we have. Maybe some of them have hearts, spleens, but they don't have other parts. Some, they have it all, but as liquids. And it's all, the whole design is different, right? And the reason why I felt it was important to do this is to not isolate the human template as being the only template or the only story, okay? That we would actually make sure that we consider that other creations probably came from other things that wanted to do whatever it is the overall goal of creating these kind of wavelengths in the first place. So what was that goal? I found that goal to be control. It's just like, let's say you have a kingdom, but then you have a person that wants their own kingdom. They see a king exercising his power, and then they want to also exercise their power as a king. I feel like that even this whole beginning with Sophia seems to be exactly that, because Sophia wanted to mimic and wanted to know the word of God, which was the world itself, to create. But why, if there's one that's already created? It's the one that you're in, basically. It's like, why do you want to create a house when you're already in a house? That's more of like what it's saying. It's because I want my own house, okay? Because in my own house, I can then rule like I want to rule. And then what that idealism is also about is that, and that's different than how you guys want to rule. So this is what makes us separate. I'm just kind of showing you how a lot of this had to play out. So anytime we don't want to, okay, because let me back up. Dan Winter also says something like on a video that I was watching, and it was like, it was a real gem. And he was discussing how back in the old days, how tribes would never go to war with each other when they were tapped into their energies and balanced. And it's because you can feel the tribe or the neighboring tribe, right? So there's a coherence going on in unity. So when we're in unity, which is basically now everywhere it's outside the visible spectrum, which I'll have you make sure you put that as a note. Everything is unified outside of the visual spectrum. So in that space, for you to kill anything is like you killing yourself. So even on Earth, in the unified space where nature is in synchronization with the people, is in synchronization with other tribes around them, for them to do things to each other that are not going to benefit each other is just like them doing it to themselves. Hence the time-old, do it to unto others as you would do unto yourself, which is like the highest universal law. Your body is like a periodic table. When you're creating another one, you're creating a replica. Okay? And when we look at this, that's exactly what it says Sophia or wisdom did, was create a replica. Now, let's imagine then that if this is true, you could see how wisdom or someone or something that is perceived to be wise can be taken off guard, okay? Because it's like when, and I had this perfectly, it's like when you now, okay, so let's imagine then that when you go into the process of creation, but you just imagine that everything is going to be good, that everything is going to be perfect. Like you're going to have your own realm to rule and all this kind of stuff. But unknowingly, at that moment, you also create the opposite of this reality. So it's just basically like you don't realize that everything that you create has like an antithesis. It has like an uncreation. So creation has to be done in a different way than, hey, I just want something, because there's a result to that. And oftentimes you won't be prepared for that result. So it's like this wisdom in itself wasn't all wise because it created something and then the result of that came forward. It's like, okay, you created good things, you created daytime, but there's got to now be night because of the way that you created that. And the way we created was we already had put this together to where that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't exist anymore. But now because you went and did that, now that's going to exist because that's a product of it. So let me make this more clear. I gotta clean it up. And this came from looking at all of the names of wisdom across different cultures, which was quite interesting. I'm just going to read verbatim from Sybil here. So we have Prajna, we have Hokmatu, which appears quite often as Hokma. We have Namtar in Sumerian. We have Speki, which sounds like speech in Scandinavian. We have Z in Chinese. We have Sis in Persian, which I believe is probably the root to why we even say sister. We have Wizum in High German. And of course we have Sophia in Greek or Coptic. And then as you look at the story, it says that basically that wisdom is like a separate being. It's just one of the aeons. Okay, and I'm going to clean this up here in a moment. And it's like what you start realizing is that what they're referring to is they're referring to something that acted without everything else, right? It did something without the consideration of everything else around it, as if it wasn't even connected to those things when in fact it was. So it becomes like a riddle because we're actually doing the same thing in real time. We are practicing certain levels of wisdom and awareness, but then the other part of it, we're almost oblivious to because we are locked into some kind of struggle or conflict. And I'm going to show you how that's resolved. But my note here was, so some type of religious sleight of hand has taken place. Like the sleight of hand is the magical trick. something's been removed and you don't even know that it's, something's been moved or changed, and you don't know it's been moved or changed. And it's left like a hole into history, her story, the reality, our awareness. And we can even say through that hole, we're also leaking. And we need to patch up this hole. So I started to, which would make it whole, right? So I started to look at the human being again and our design, and kind of come out of that whole creation box and realize what we truly are as DNA and what DNA can do. And it came to something very simple in this way. If you put DNA in the water, it will reanimate an entire reality again. It could take time as we know time, but reality will unfold again. So, as in this new series, the three body problem, if one of us survives, all of us survives. And even in that publication, they were showing human beings being rolled up like scrolls. And we've talked about before how the DNA is also a scroll. But they also are saying that, hey, you need to bring on the water, and then everybody hydrates. And this is what they're saying in the three body problem series. But the direct connection between water and DNA cannot be ignored. Wherever we go, wherever the DNA floats, even across the cosmos, if it lands in the water again, it will boot up this entire mainframe again. Also, we need to understand that we're rolling with quite a bit. We're not just bacteria. We're not just viruses. We're not just human beings. So our DNA is packed with it's like the real ark. It's everything that we are. And then the moment that it gets into some water, it starts multiplying and unpacking itself. Kind of like, I don't know, like a mugwai. You remember that story, Gremlins, when they dumped water on the gremlin and then he would just, you know what I mean? As long as they did it, at a certain time, you'd just be a lot of little mugwais everywhere, and they were cute. But then what happened if you did it the wrong time or fed them after midnight, then they became gremlins, right? So, just kind of breaking the ice here a little bit. But what I'm saying is that we got to start taking a step back from what we really think that we are so we can see the big picture. And when you understand that, hey, we're DNA, then you start looking at DNA and be like, well, wait a minute. This stuff right here is it's like the stuff of science fiction and even horror movies. You get a little bit of this and you drip it somewhere, and then next thing you know, you have billions of these beings. And they bring their infrastructure, they bring their furniture. Like I'll just say, just take a step back and think about all this. So somebody comes in, whoop, time. Next thing you know, millions, billions of them, the infrastructure, everything that they create consistently, but they're creating based on a archetypical pattern. And there is so many variables, just like everybody here looks different, right? So that just shows you just the expanse of what the code can really do. But in many ways, we're actually all the same. And in fact, we are 100% all the same. And actually, every single thing that comes from this is all the same. But yet and still, all the same comes with a lot. And then this also equates to then what we would say is the visible spectrum of reality or separation, and the difference between those who have the power to transcend the separative fields, which are in themselves like black holes, like wormholes, like vacuums, and then actually activate their true bargaining chip, which is their own ability to have bliss, your own ability to actually generate high levels of energy. So meaning your bargaining chip in the reality is your ability to implode your bliss. It's your ability to be able to get into a higher state of consciousness and actually emit more energy than you're actually taking in. Okay, so that means then, and this was another part of this, I started looking heavily into how the actions how everything is being basically guided on how we're guiding others. But I thought about this in a crude way. I knew this guy, we call him the Lord of War. And we call him that. He was an old dude from like Detroit or something. Very, very like just old school, very mean. I happened to just meet him through another friend that was very influential. But we call him Lord of War because he owned a factory that made bullets. And in talking to this guy or getting reports back from my other friend about conversation with this guy was talking about how for the next 20 years, his factory has already been bought. Like he has contracts 20 years in the future from the US government to keep making these bullets. And then I just thought about that guy, like I thought about my other friend earlier. This is what I do. You can imagine I vicarious myself through a lot of different roles to learn a lot of things. And I thought about like, what would it be like to know that you're creating something that is really killing people? Like, and then, you know, his stance was like, he just wasn't connected to it at all. His past, his childhood was so terrible that it removed all of the empathy from him. So that was his thing. That's how he could do it, because he really just didn't care in that way. It wasn't like he was a super patriot or anything like that. But then I started to think about like what that's like on like the karmic scale, but not like afterlife, but this life. And it brought me to that, especially early in my 20s when I used to keep up a lot of ruckus. And this is not even just like doing bad things. It could also be with trying to be a player. It could be with, you know, not being honest about something that you're engaged in, or you're working with some folks and they're shady and this kind of thing. And just how chaotic life always was. Like stuff would just hit you out of nowhere all the time. And of course, now being metaphysically inclined and also living a totally different life, it's easy to see that all the stuff that was happening because of these things that I was doing to others. So I was just calling this my name's on the bullet, meaning that if somebody did not prosper because of something that I did, I was paying for that. The same way as if they did prosper because of something that I did, I was being rewarded for that. And that this system that we're in still functions that way. And you should never really think edgewise, that truly, if your name is on the great things that are happening for others, your path will continuously just lay itself out, and you will keep getting more wiser and more aware of who you are and what you need to do. But when you start derailing people and you practice things that you know are throwing others off and hurting them, you got to imagine that is the only check and balance system in whatever is actually going on here, because you also inherit those traits. And not only and you inherit them. Now, when I'm saying is you inherit those traits, actually you unlock those traits. Okay, because remember, all of these traits are inside of the DNA soup. All of these things can happen, and even wisdom didn't know. This is what I'm getting at here. It's like, if you act selfishly, you may miss what happens because you acted selfishly. You see what I mean? But the universe doesn't.